I left the Wasatch Front Regional Council and went to work for the Utah Transit Authority. And I did that because all of a sudden, it seemed to me, we were able to get a sales tax initiative passed, and we're actually forming a regional transit authority, 3 counties at that time. And we were, trying to figure out how to run a bus company because everybody who knew how to run a bus company was gone. And so here was a bunch of young guys like me and John Pingree and Michael Legger and a few others trying to figure out how do you run a bus company. We learned the hard way, believe me. It's too bad it had to be that way. But this is a document that I'm very, very proud of because I think the issues that were discovered in this document are the same issues. I shouldn't be proud of this fact because they are the same issues we're dealing with today. I can be proud of the fact, though, that we have an extraordinarily better transportation system for senior citizens and people with disabilities today. And I hope you understand that. Some of you, as I look around here, many of you are too young to have been born when this came out, so you might not have experienced the system that wasn't in those days. But as we grew and developed with UTA, we began, putting wheelchair lifts on buses. We developed a system called FlexTrans, and a lot of other things have followed since then. That's not to say that the problem is solved. It is not. We're a long way from having this issue resolved. In fact, what we've done in a way is create optimism and hope in that population that they ultimately will, as the Urban Mass Transportation Act of 1964 said, it is to be the national policy that elderly and handicapped persons have the same right as other persons to use mass transportation facilities and services. Now that I don't think we're there. I think UTA goes in some ways beyond the scope of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but even that doesn't really create the opportunities for transportation for many people in our community. And one of the problems that was pointed out in this study back then was that we have all these little agencies, all little and big agencies, spending money on transportation, but in a very uncoordinated way. And I'm sorry to say that seems to still be the case today. We still have a lot of agencies out there who have transportation dollars, who are spending those dollars and doing the best job they can in providing transportation for their particular clientele. But UTA is serving the broad spectrum of clientele. We want to serve everybody. And we're limited by resources. It's made difficult by the fact that federal guidelines and state policies and so forth limit our ability to provide coverage in certain areas. And I think we have to take into account that the role of transit in a modern Salt Lake urbanized area is a different one than it was 30 years ago. When I began, a lot of our focus was on providing transportation for people with disabilities, people who couldn't drive, young people, senior citizens. Today, the focus is on the whole population, and it's much bigger now because it has to do with air quality issues. It has to do with congestion issues. It has to do with very real economic issues that we're trying to address. And I think more than any other community that I've seen in the United States, we're actually further along. So we have the vision, we have the kind of political leadership we need in this state to really solve all of these problems. And I'm hoping that this Future Search Conference is not designed to end up at the end of the day with the actual solutions. That's too difficult. It's too difficult to get people with so many different points of view and perspectives. What this conference, I hope, will end up with is to be a stimulant for people who can and are willing to work hard to make a difference, to make something happen, and to get out there and do it in a reasonable way. Do it in a way that can really work. Have a plan. Say, this is what we need. This is a realistic solution to part of this issue. I'm going to go work on that. Now, in order for that plan to be a realistic plan, it has to be understood. All of the parties need to understand what the whole issue is. And so one of the big roles of Future Search here, we very carefully went through and selected all of you to be here. Not because you are all the same, because you're not. Every person here was picked because you represent a particular population that is different from everybody else. You have a different perspective. You may hate UTA. That's okay. We want you here. You may love UTA. We want you here. And this is, while it's UTA sponsored, this is not about UTA. This is about the very real issue of transportation for everybody in our community, and how can we best address it, and how can we achieve that kind of goal. So I want to challenge you all. This group is being led quite admirably by a couple of very professional people who wrote their bios for me on a napkin. Let me just say, this is the kind of people they are. And the two folks, Bengt and Drusilla, they're back here. Raise your hand. Most of you can't see them through the pillars here, but these two, Drusilla is actually on our staff. Bengt is from Sweden, and they both go around the country putting on these kinds of conferences, not necessarily, in fact, probably not typically, about this particular subject. They do it on a myriad of subjects. This is used by the United Nations and UNICEF, and I don't know who all have been their clients, but it's used to deal with difficult problems where there are many, many points of view and many perspectives, to try to get people to understand everybody's point of view and find those things that can actually be accomplished. Bengt and Drusilla have facilitated two other conferences at UTA. They were both labor-related. As you can imagine, we have a large labor union, and sometimes we get crosswise. And let me tell you that one issue, we finally reached at the end of the Future Search Conference the position that we can't solve this. There is not a perfect solution for everybody, so let's just quit fighting about it and live with it. And that's what happened. We'd had an issue, one of those kind of employee issues that have been going on. It wasn't about UTA, the company. It was about labor and how they were getting along. And they finally just said, you know what? Everybody has a legitimate point of view. I think we're just going to have to live with things the way they are. That's okay. The other one was a very real issue having to do with the way we work. New people who come into UTA, we have something called the Extra Board. Very, very difficult working environment. You work 6 days a week. In order to get 35 or 40 hours, it's a tough job. And people at UTA have been bus operators. Be nice to them. They've been working those kinds of conditions for many, many years. And we determined that we were going to try to solve that problem. And out of that Future Search Conference came a solution to that problem. It was a very real solution. It's implemented. And that was one of the great achievements, I think, that issue went away. So I share that with you so you know that out of this can come real solutions. I can't begin to dictate to you now what they are, but I think you will come up with them. And if we do this Future Search Conference right, you will feel comfortable and safe here. You can have a different point of view. You can express yourself. This is the kind of environment we want to maintain here. And there's no limitation on what the solution might be. There are probably practical limitations when we leave the place here that we'll have to struggle with and deal with. But I think I'm very impressed with the crowd that we have here and the kind of people we have here. So I'm going to say let's kick this off. Let's get going. If everybody is eaten, there's probably still some candy and goodies up here for those of you who really need that. But we can now, I think, go downstairs. Follow Drusilla and Bengt, and we'll go downstairs to our working area and get to work. Thank you all for coming.